So you're longing for love. It's something that you've always desired, but you feel lonely and disconnected. You know about the importance of love. You've heard quotes like, life minus love equals zero. You've been to weddings and you've heard the love chapter, love is patient, love is kind. You know why love is important. But if the truth are to be known, there's something missing. There's an emptiness in your life. And what you're searching for, what you're longing for, is kind of a step-by-step process on how to build love in your life. Well, if that's you, I want to encourage you to stick around for this series that I'm starting today on how to build loving relationships. Now, my name is Steve, and if we've never met before, I want to thank you for joining me. I've been a pastor for 27 years, and in those 27 years, I've helped people with their marriages and their relationships, and I've also gone through counseling for my own marriage. And it was during one of those sessions of counseling for my own marriage that I was introduced to something called the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse by Dr. John Gottman. And these are 4 things that if they are in a relationship, they can be very damaging. The reason he calls them the 4 Horsemen is because in the New Testament, the 4 Horsemen depict the end of time. And if these 4 things are in a relationship, they can really wreak havoc on that relationship. And when our counselor pointed out these 4 things, I remember thinking, wow, I'm doing some of these things to my wife. And I remember going home that day and just writing in my journal, I want to get the horsemen out of my house. So in the next few weeks, I'm going to be just sharing the 4 horsemen with you. And I'm not talking down to you because these are things I need God's grace to help me with as well. And today we're going to just talk about the 4 first horsemen. If you want to build loving relationships, you need to avoid this. Number 1 is a critical spirit. Now, what is a critical spirit? It's fault finding. It's when you're constantly looking for what's wrong in the other person. I remember I used to teach my kids, I would put a dot on a whiteboard and I say, what do you see? And when most people look at that, they see the black dot. But what they don't see is all the white around it. And it's easy to become a fault finder and to become critical of other people. In fact, in Matthew chapter 7, Jesus said, and why worry about the speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own eye? How can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of the speck in your eye, when you can't get past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite, first get rid of the log in your own eye, then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. Now we need to remember that Jesus was a carpenter, so he was very familiar with wood. And when he talks about seeing the speck in your neighbor's eye, this would have been something that like a bird's nest would have been built from. So it was very small and irrelevant. The log was something that a house would have rested on. So Jesus says, why do you focus on the speck in your neighbor's eye when there's a log in your own eye? And it's just easy to become a fault finder. You say, well, Steve, what about valid complaints? That's one of the things our counselor taught us, is that there is a place for valid complaints. And the way to share a valid complaint is to use something called the gentle startup. Let me give you the format. I felt blank when you did blank. What I would want is blank, and I appreciate this about you. So I felt unimportant when you were looking at your phone while we were talking. What I would want is for you to put down your phone and look me in the eye. And I appreciate that you're just as committed to this relationship as I am. Now, when I learned that, I remember going home and just practicing the gentle startup. I envisioned scenarios in my mind and I just practiced it. Kind of like when I was in sports, I'd practice free throws. I'd practice dribbles. And in a similar way, I practiced the gentle startup so I could become skilled with it. Well, let me just ask you for a moment to just do a self-assessment. Do you have a critical spirit? If so, I would just encourage you to pray and say, Lord Jesus Christ, please remove this critical spirit from me. I don't want to be a fault finder. I want to be a person who deals with others in grace and truth. Well, make sure you join us for the next series, because the next message, because I'm going to be talking about the second thing that can really ruin your relationships. And the reason we're learning these things is that sometimes in order to learn what to do, you have to learn what not to do. So next week, we're going to talk about the second thing that is really damaging on your relationships. Well, thanks so much for joining me. May you love God and love your neighbor as yourself.